Hello, everyone. Welcome to our June Training Tuesday event for OU Campus. Today's topic is social media meta tags. We're going to be talking about common uses of these tags and how to add them in OU Campus. During the presentation, all participants will be in a listen-only mode as the session is being recorded. If you have a question during the presentation, please use the Q&A function found at the bottom of your Zoom window. For regular attendees, we know this is a new interface that might take a little getting used to, so don't hesitate to ask questions. To exit full screen, hover over the top of your screen, click View Options, and select Exit Full Screen. We will attempt to address your questions during the presentation. After the formal presentation has ended, we will review and answer all remaining questions. Your presenter today is Brandon Shireman, software trainer at Omni Update. Brandon, I'll hand it over to you.
Thanks, Erica. For all of you who are attending today, hello, welcome. We're excited to talk about social media meta tags, or I might just shorten that to social meta during today. I apologize in advance for my voice. You get radio voice Brandon today. My voice is a little hoarse, but I think we can power through it together. So yes, as Erica was saying, we're going to be talking about social meta tags and how that process is working. Basically, we're going to overview what they are in the first place, address a little bit about why they're useful at all, why we're even talking about this. There's kind of two main portions of social meta tags. There are open graph tags, which you're primarily going to be using for Facebook. And then there's Twitter cards, which, as the name implies, are more specifically related to Twitter. So those are kind of like the big two that we're going to be talking about today. There are a couple other ones that are generic, excuse me, but those are going to be kind of the big two that you'll see throughout the web. We're going to spend most of our time as a live demonstration after these PowerPoints. I'm going to kind of show you what it looks like when you have a page that doesn't have any social meta tags on them. And then next, you also can look into what it looks like when they do exist. And that process is great, but then we can actually take it one step further using XSL to actually bring these types of social meta tags into your OU Campus templates. So it's not like you have to manually put this in HTML every single time you want to use it. So let's start off with the basics, just a quick little social meta tags 101 course, if you will. What are they in the first place? So I'm assuming that most of you on this call are familiar with your normal metadata. Your things like your page title, your description, your keywords, things that are utilized for SEO purposes and things like that. So all of that stuff lives in the head of your HTML document, the head tag. So it's not actually going to be showing up on the page itself. It shows up in a section that basically other services are going to read when they scan your pages. So basically the purpose of that is it's just telling people basic information about the page that they're about to travel to. So that's what normal metadata is used for. Some examples could be your title of the page. That'll show up in like your browser tab, for example. Then you have your description, which can be used when you're displaying search results on a page. Keywords as well, not as useful anymore, but still a thing that exists, and a bunch of others. So that's like your normal metadata. Social media meta tags are basically the same thing, but they're just going to be used specifically by social media channels like Facebook and Twitter. So when you share a link on one of those services, the social media platform can pull information about your page from these specialized metadata tags to give users even a clearer picture of what they're about to click on a link to. It also gives it a nicer looking user interface and makes it larger to essentially just drive engagement of those links and other things that you're sharing on these social media platforms. So the beauty of this is that since they're separate tags, you can cater your pages to deliver the most relevant information when you're sharing them on social media services, and maybe that relevant information may not be as useful in a more generic use case. So, I might want to have certain information be displayed when my page is showing up in a Google search, but I might want some more specific information to be displayed if I'm the one sharing that page on Facebook or LinkedIn or, something to that effect. So that's kind of the primary usage for social meta tags. And as the world becomes more and more socially connected and Facebook and Twitter become more and more important for marketing purposes, not just for, your grandma sharing a post to your friend group, social meta tags have also become more important because they're a key factor in driving engagement and, getting content shared more than just an average link. So there are two main standards for these social meta tags, and I referred to them earlier. They're called open graph tags, and there's also Twitter cards. So essentially, from a visual standpoint, you can basically go from this over here, just sharing a link on a Facebook post, to something that's way more robust, that looks way prettier, and is just visually appealing to the point where you are much more likely to click on this than just some random link that has no information associated with it. So that's what social media meta tags can help us do. So a little bit of information about how they exist and how they look and how to get them onto a page. Let's talk about Open Graph first. So Open Graph tags are made by the Open Graph protocol. This was originally developed by Facebook, but it's not just for Facebook usage anymore. It's considered kind of the most universal standard. Other platforms like Twitter and LinkedIn and stuff like that are going to pull from your metadata that is defined as an Open Graph tag. So the format for these, when you put it into the code of a page, it's going to look something like this. You're going to have the meta tag, just like you would for all of your other normal metadata. But instead of having the meta name be description or something like that, you give it the meta property of OG : and then the name of the tag, because there's several that you can use. And then just like any other piece of metadata, you're going to put your content inside of a content attribute. And that's all going to go inside of the head tag with all of your other metadata. So likely you're going to have several of these meta property OG blah, blah, blahs based upon the content you want to deliver. So some examples for the meta tags that exist in this Open Graph landscape. You have OG title, as the name implies, that's like the title of the web page. If you wanted, you can have that be a separate title from the one that shows up in your browser tab. The OG type sort of determines what kind of information you are conveying. So is it a video? Is it an article? Things along those lines. OG image, that would give you that big thumbnail image. OG URL, the URL of the page. OG site name, that's the the actual full site, the main domain of whatever page you're pulling from. Things like that are some of the examples of the Open Graph tags that you can use. There's plenty of others beyond just these, but this is enough to kind of give you an idea of what kind of information we're attempting to present. Now on the other side of things, you have Twitter cards, and these are only used on Twitter, as kind of the name implies. It allows you to add some specific metadata for when you're sharing a post on Twitter, such as the Twitter handle of the organization that published this article, or the creator, the person who wrote the article. Maybe you're sharing a post, but someone else from some other organization was the one who actually wrote it. You can have the Twitter handle of both of those people be output on a Twitter card. And there's also different types of formatting for the Twitter cards. You can have autoplay video, you can have an article, different formats as well. So a note about Twitter specifically is that if you don't have any special Twitter cards on a page, the Twitter platform is actually going to pull from any Open Graph tags that you have and use those. So that's kind of how Open Graph is a bit more of the universal standard. Even if there's no specific Twitter cards on the page, Twitter is going to pull from Open Graph if it can. So the format for these are very similar to Open Graph, but they're a bit different. So it's the meta, but then instead of a meta property, we're back to the normal meta name, and then it's going to do Twitter : instead of OG : and then the format, the rest of it is the same as we saw earlier. So some examples of what you can do with Twitter cards. You can do Twitter card, which will determine the format for the big panel that you're going to share on the Twitter post. The Twitter site tells you here's the Twitter handle for the organization that's sharing this post, for example. Twitter creator is the person who actually wrote the article, so you could tag someone else's Twitter handle there. the Twitter URL, the URL of the page, Twitter description. You can have a custom description that will only show up when you share the post on Twitter, and that could be different from what you share on Facebook and would be different from the normal meta description that would show up on search engine results. So once again, just like with Open Graph, that's not all of the Twitter cards that exist, but it gives you an idea of kind of the information we can see. So let's go ahead and actually take a look at what this looks like on an actual page. So here what I have is I have a couple example pages that I built out. The content itself is not super important, but I have two versions of the page. This one right here that I have is called nosocialmeta.html. And then this one right over here is called social meta tags. So the content between these two from an article standpoint is exactly the same. The only difference is whether or not I have added some social meta tags to these pages. Let's look at the source of them really quickly before I share them so we can see what this looks like. So I've just essentially built them in OU Campus right here. Let's look at the no social meta to start off with. If I look at the source of this, you can see that there's my, here, let me just bump up the sizing on this a little bit. Here's my head tag, which is where all my metadata resides, whether it's normal metadata or social metadata. You can see here that I have a meta name of description. This is my normal page description. I've got my title tag to give me the title of the post. And then I just have some CSS, and that's it. So the only thing that I have on this page is title and description, and that would show up on browser tabs. For example, my normal page title right here, you can see that showing up in my Chrome tabs for both of them, actually. So let's see what happens if I were to take this page that doesn't have any social meta tags on it, and we'll put it on a Twitter post, for example. Twitter actually tends to give me a more stark contrast between whether I have meta tags and don't, so I'll use them first as an example. So let's just copy that URL, pull up Twitter, and I'm going to make a new tweet. Check out this page. And then I'm going to go ahead and share that link, and I'm going to tweet it out. So by sharing that link, let me just refresh to get my timeline to show up. As you can see, the tweet is literally just a tweet. It's got my post, and it's got the link right here. No other information is being shared. Okay, not that exciting. Let's see what happens if I go and take my social meta tags page and put it on Twitter again. So once again, same content, but this one's got some social media meta tags added to it. From a source code perspective, if we go into the source code of this one, you can see that I've got my head once again, and you'll see that after I've put in my normal page description, I have provided some social metadata, which is right here. So you'll notice here that I'm only using these OGs. These are my Open Graph tags. I didn't put any Twitter cards in here just for now, just because this is a simple illustration to show, you know, 0 versus some. But you can see that I have the property of OG title, and the content is I'm just saying, here's my Open Graph title. Same thing for description. Here's my Open Graph description. The idea is that these two right here are going to overwrite the normal page title and the normal page description if they were to be shared. The OG type dictates that it's an article, which is just kind of the standard for normal web pages. I've also provided the OG URL that points to this page, which is actually incorrect. Let's update that. And I also have provided an OG image, which means that I have an image thumbnail that I can associate with this particular post. So all that being said, I have some social meta tags. I'll just publish that because I wanted to adjust my OG URL here. And let's take this page and post that on Twitter as well and see how that gets different. So we'll go in here, check out this page once again. And I'm going to post that new URL. Now this time when I hit tweet, it's going to send out the tweet. And if I refresh my timeline, now we can see that I have this nice little card that shows up in the tweet that has my image thumbnail, it has my Open Graph title, my Open Graph description, as well as the main domain for the URL that I posted. And if I click on that, it's now just a more attractive link that takes me back to the same page. But you could see that I would be much more willing to click on this than just some random page that was linked on some sort of tweet. So you can see from a visual standpoint, it's night and day as to which one's cool and which one's a little bit questionable, right? So let's take that same concept and just do the same thing on Facebook. Facebook does things a bit differently than Twitter, but just so you're aware of how it kind of works out. I'm going to go ahead and grab my no social meta to start off with. And we're going to just go to Facebook, and I'm just going to make a Facebook post. Hey, look at this page I made. And then I'm going to paste. And you'll see here that even with the page that doesn't have any social meta tags, Facebook tends to do a bit more legwork, and it's going to try to pull from your normal metadata to grab some of that information. So here's what it's doing. It's grabbing my normal page title and my normal page description. And you'll also see that it's basically grabbed every image that lives on my page. If we just go back really quick, I have this little crest in the body, and I've got this big image in the body. Facebook has essentially parsed through the entire page and said, hey, there's some images. Do you want to use either of these as a thumbnail? And I could say, maybe not. But in any case, you can see that I have been able to get some metadata to show up in a card, if you will, on Facebook, even without any social meta tags. But I don't have control, as fine of control, over what some of this information says. Now, if I were to go back to my social meta tags, the one that's got all of that information, and make a Facebook post from there, you can see that it's going to still pull some of the same information, but I was able to overwrite the normal description and the normal title with the ones that I defined in Open Graph. So you can see that the contrast is a little bit more stark on from a Twitter standpoint than Facebook. But either way, even on Facebook, I have much more fine control over what my message is going to be if I use these social meta tags. And then I can make my post, and there my post. Beautiful. Cool. So that's kind of the general principle for how things look when you have them versus when you don't. But at this point in time, I've only illustrated them to you from pages that I literally built from scratch in HTML. If I were to grab a page that was built using OU Campus, things get a little bit different because I've got page parameters. I've got XSL that's actually kind of working in conjunction with these editable regions to give me a full-fledged page, right? So if I go to the page properties of my page right now, typically the properties area is where I'm going to see all of my metadata. As of right now, the only pieces of metadata I have are just title and description, and then the taxonomy part of OU Campus for these tags. So if I were to save this page and publish it out to the live site, the HTML that I am generating at this point in time, if I view the source of it, you can see that this is the entirety of my head. And notice that I've got my title right here. I've got like a favicon, and I've got some CSS, and then eventually I've got my description if I had one. I think my description happened to be blank on this example page, but you get the idea. I don't have any social media meta tags that are being used right now. So here, the main thing that I want to show you today is how can we grab those social media meta tags and build them into my OU Campus templates so we can, at the end of the day, output those social media pieces of metadata without having to just code them from scratch every single time, because that would obviously be a little crazy. So there are many approaches we can take. Any approach we take will ultimately involve doing some XSL in order to actually get that information output onto your published content. But luckily, a lot of the work has actually been done for you. If you guys ever want to, you can go to github.com/omniupdate, and you don't even need to have a GitHub account. You can just get there straight up. And if you scroll down you're going to see all of these example code repositories. Now, these are some things that our awesome professional services team have built out to give you guys essentially some starter code that you can plug and play into your existing implementation. So maybe we didn't build any sort of open graph tags into your existing implementation. Maybe you didn't think that that was a very big need for you at that point in time. That's okay, because I can go to my example code social meta right here. And I have some example XSL that's basically ready to go, in addition to this README file that essentially tells you, first of all, what open graph tags are, kind of gives a bit of an introduction, kind of like what we were just looking at. But it also tells you actually how to put this into your site. So we're basically just going to go through and get this example XSL into my templates on the call here to illustrate kind of how easy it is for you guys to turn around and do basically the same thing. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm just going to scroll down to this using the starter code portion, and it's going to walk me through the steps for what I need to do. So the first thing is I need to grab the XSL that's been pre-written and bring that into my instance of OU Campus. So if I scroll up here, you can see that I've got my resources XSL shared. It's just this one file. I'm just going to go ahead and grab all of the source, and I'm just going to create a new file in the system. You could just download this file and upload it into OU Campus, whatever way you want to get this file into the system. So as the file structure was telling me earlier, I'm going to put this in my _resources/XSL folder. So back in OU Campus right here, we're going to go to the root of my site, go to resources, XSL. Now, for most of you, you're probably going to have an _shared folder inside of that XSL folder. The shared folder is just kind of where all of your XSL that's used on all of your pages is basically going to reside. It's just kind of shared content that's kind of used universally. And this social metadata, ideally, we would like to have this on every page. So we're going to go ahead and put that file inside of shared. So I'm just going to go here and make a new file. I'm going to call it socialmeta.xsl. Oops, XSL. Oh, sorry about that. Let me just adjust my access settings here. All right, there we go. Socialmeta.xsl. I've got a blank source code file, and I'm just going to go ahead and paste all of that XSL that was in there beforehand. So we'll come back to kind of explaining what each little piece of this does. But before we do that, I want to make sure that it can actually be used on the page, because it's not just a simple matter of uploading this file. We also have to kind of essentially bring this new chunk of code into the template. And so there's just a couple small steps that we're going to take to get that done. So it exists. I'm just going to go ahead and save an initial version. Now, there's a chance if you have, a really customized implementation, or maybe you've been with us for a long time and your XSL structure is a bit different from kind of what we're going to be seeing here on today's call. It may require a little bit of modification in order to get this code essentially operating properly inside of your site. But I would imagine that for most of you, it's going to be really, really plug and play. So you should be able to basically follow the entire steps that I'm doing right here. Okay, step one is done. I've brought the social meta XSL into the site. Essentially, the purpose of this file is it's going to handle the generation of those open graph tags for us. And it provides the mechanism by which we can add them to the head code more efficiently than if we had to write them by hand on every single page. So really quickly, you can see that I have the meta properties, OG title, OG URL, OG description. All of that stuff is existing inside of this XSL file. So we'll come down line by line and explain a bit more about what it's doing. But for now, what I'm going to go ahead and do is go to my next step in the README file. And we're just going to follow that. So as it says up here, the file should be placed inside of XSL/_shared. XSL files, as a reminder, don't ever need to be published, but it is a good idea to save a version. So for those of you who do find that you want to make some modifications to this starter code, you should probably do what I did at first. Upload the file into the system, manually save a version just to indicate, hey, this is what I brought in from GitHub directly. And then if you need to make any edits after the fact, once you've made those edits, go ahead and save another version just so it's clear that you've modified that file and you kind of know what has changed over time. So my second step is I need to essentially update my existing XSL to bring in that code that I just uploaded. So we're going to go into common.xsl, which is kind of the mother template, the mother file for our XSL. It's kind of the origin from which everything else is kind of built off of. So if we go back to the big XSL folder, most of you should have a common.xsl, which is kind of where the page starts getting built effectively. So if I scroll my way down, you'll see here that there's my head tag, and here's where some of my metadata starts getting output. So what I'm eventually going to want to do is I'm going to put a little bit of code in here that brings in that social meta information from the social meta file that I just uploaded. But before I write any code inside the head, what I need to do is I need to tell common.xsl that the social meta file actually exists, because the system doesn't just know that intuitively. You have to go up here and do what's called an import. And importing a style sheet into XSL just means that as soon as common.xsl gets loaded, whenever there's a use case for that, it's going to run through this and say, oh, well, I can't just load the code that lives in this file. I'm going to bring in the code that lives in this file, and in this file, and in this file, and so on and so forth. So before we start doing any sort of code that uses my social meta information, I have to tell the system to actually bring that into its kind of working space. So I'm going to do what's called an import command, which is just XSL:import. And then I provide the location for where that file is located. So just like with importing CSS files or anything like that, I can just go in here and say _shared / social meta.xsl. All right, so I've now told common.xsl to bring that file into the system and make all of the code that lives within that file available for use. And now I'm going to scroll down into the head, and just for fun, I'm going to go ahead and put a comment here just to call it out. Social meta tags. Go here. And then I'm going to go back to my README, and I'm going to follow this step right here, which is going to call the XSL template from within the social meta information. So I'm going to basically just go in here and just copy this over, but I'm going to explain a little bit about what this is doing. So by saying call template with the name of social meta, we're essentially kind of using this as just a reference to another chunk of code that lives elsewhere. So whenever I use common.xsl to create an HTML page at the end of the day, it's going to run through this and it's going to say, all right, we're going to make an HTML document. We're going to create a head. We're going to put all of this information in here. And then as soon as it hits call template, social meta, it's going to look for a thing in XSL that's actually called a template. That's different from your OU campus templates. It's, this is just a thing that this language uses. And it's looking for a template with the specific name of social-meta. That template lives within the social meta XSL that we created before. So effectively, what we're going to be doing is, as soon as the code gets to this point in time, it's going to start searching for that, and it's going to ultimately find that in this social meta file that we imported previously. And you can see that I have a corresponding thing that's called XSL template and a name of social meta. So basically this matches up with what we're calling right here. So you could effectively take all the stuff that lives within this XSL template and effectively take it out of this file and replace the call template with that, and it does the same thing. But this is just a way to kind of make sure that the code is a little cleaner. So what I might want to also say is call template social meta. I might put a little comment in here because ultimately this template, like I said, lives in another file. So I might want to just mention, if anybody else is going through the source code, I can go ahead and say social meta template is in _shared / social meta.xsl. Just to indicate, hey, if you ever need to figure out some of the information that's being generated by this, here's where you should go to actually edit that code. All right. So with that information being called by common, it's going to go ahead and do all of the information that lives within here before it moves on past that line in common and starts doing my style sheets and stuff like that. So now let's talk about exactly what this social meta file is actually doing. So the social meta file, as I mentioned, is what's actually creating the OG tags and potentially the Twitter cards for the page itself. So we can just run through each one of these lines and I'll kind of just explain a little bit about what's happening. And then ultimately we're going to test this out a couple times. So the first thing is that we have an if statement, which is just doing a logical test. And it says if $OU OG image is not empty, then we're going to create an OG image tag and grab the content from it. So what is $OU : OG image in the first place? We're actually going to, this starter code leverages a feature in OU Campus that you may be familiar with that's called a directory variable. So the directory variable is a way for you to add information to a page on a section by section basis without having to go to each individual page to provide that information. So some use cases for directory variables is maybe I have a portion of my website that's the business division, and the business division has a different heading somewhere in the header. So what I can do is I could have a directory variable that says department title, and I provide, blah, 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 School of Business. And then for all of the pages that live within that portion of the website, the header is going to say blah, 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 School of Business. But perhaps there's another portion of the website that is the School of Dentistry. And so I want the header or the department title to be blah, 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 School of Dentistry instead. So it's using the same variable, but just the value is going to change depending on where I am within the site. So the same concept can work with all of these social meta tags. What I can do is I can say I want to have a directory variable that's called OG image, which would be the open graph image. And I want to have one image be used for a certain folder in my site, but then maybe another portion of my site, I want to use a different image. So maybe all of the pages that are shared from the athletics department, I want to get an image of one of my athletes from the university, making a layup on the basketball court, just to indicate that it's athletics related, perhaps. But maybe if I'm talking about the admissions department or maybe the library, I want to have a photo of, something nice on campus, or I want to have a photo of someone studying in the library. And when I share links from those portions of the website, I want that image to show up instead of the person making the layup, because that's not going to make much sense if I have that as my library image, right? So I'm able to use these directory variables, and we basically are declaring them all right up here. So the directory variables that this lets you use are OG image, the open graph image. You can even have a specialized image for Twitter that's different from the open graph one. You can define the creator of the content for Twitter, the site for Twitter, and then FB admins and FB app ID are both open graph tags, sort of, but they're specifically just being used for Facebook to track things like analytics from an admin perspective. So you can essentially kind of like manage impressions and run analytics on your links that are being shared by providing specialized ID numbers to indicate that this is what it's coming from and stuff like that. So these are all directory variables. You need to declare them here, and then we're essentially just using the values of them down into this. So the first thing is, if I have defined a directory variable that says here's the image, then we're going to go ahead and output the image. The next one on the list doesn't have an if statement. It just says the title, the Open Graph title that we're using. By default, it's actually just going to grab the title of the page. So this just makes sure that if I'm sharing a post on Facebook or, Twitter, for example, that when I share that link, it's not just going to be a dumb link. At the very least, it's going to pull the actual metadata title, like the normal one, and display that there. So Facebook does that for you, but not all social media channels do that. So this one is useful for Twitter. And in the same way, the OG URL, the URL from the page that you're about to share, this is another just required element for Open Graph. The content of this one is the system's going to automatically grab your URL and output it. So you don't have to manually define that yourself. The description, same idea. This one's going to be grabbing from just your normal description by default. The site name, it's going to just grab the same thing as the title is. The OG type is going to be website. The OG type is just a general way to determine kind of the format of what type of thing you're sharing on Facebook or Twitter or whatnot. So we're just defining that every page that we're sharing is going to be a website, because ultimately it's a web page on your website. So if you wanted to, you could check out some of the documentation that Facebook has on all of the different Open Graph tags and all the different types that it supports. If you wanted to, you could perhaps turn this into something that's not hard-coded. You could maybe have it be something where it does come from a directory variable. You could go in and define another directory variable up here called, OU OG type. And then instead of having it be a hard-coded website, you could have it pull from the directory variable. So instead of doing that, it can just grab the value of OU OG type. Just like that. Oops. Just like that. So you could potentially do this. This is kind of the benefit of this. It's all XSL that you're free to modify. You can play around with this, add more functionality to it. You can change up some of this functionality, but I'm just at this point in time meaning to kind of indicate at least what the basics do for you, and then you can kind of take it from there. So this stuff is kind of all just pulling from, predefined information. You have the ability to associate an image. And then down here, you have the same type of functionality for the FB admins and the app ID. If you've defined some of those unique identifiers to track more analytics data on your business pages, then it will output those as well from the directory variables. And now moving on, it's got some other things for Twitter. So you've got your Twitter card. Content is summary. So like I mentioned in the PowerPoint, the Twitter card determines the format for what that card looks like when you share it on that platform. Once again, this is like the OG type. We're just manually defining it to be a summary card because a summary card is better for kind of general purpose websites. There's others that are like autoplay video and things like that. But in this case, we're not sharing just a video, we're sharing a web page, which is why we've hard-coded the content as summary, which is kind of the general option. The OU Twitter site and OU Twitter creator are going to output the Twitter site and Twitter creator cards if those directory variables have been defined. If the directory variables have not been defined, just like the ones up here, then we're not going to output that metadata, because if it's empty, there's obviously no point in us having it. And then a couple other pieces of information. Like I mentioned, if Twitter doesn't have a specific card defined for it, it's just going to pull from the Open Graph tags. So we've already defined what the Open Graph title is and what the Open Graph description is. So we don't necessarily need to redefine the Twitter title and the Twitter description unless we wanted those descriptions and titles to be different based upon the social media channels that we're using. So this comment down here if I just remove it really quickly, you can see that we do have pieces that output the Twitter title and the Twitter description and also the Twitter URL, but you only need to use these if you want them to be different than the ones we've already defined up here. If you're fine just using the Open Graph ones, then you can just leave this stuff commented out and it's not going to matter. So at the end of the day, that's a very quick description as to kind of what the starter code does. We decided to use directory variables because that's going to make it the most fast and efficient way to add this social metadata to as many pages as you can in as quick of a way as possible. Another approach that you could take with some of this, maybe I don't want to define the Open Graph image on a directory by directory base. Maybe instead I want to define that image on a page by page base. If I want to do that, then I basically wouldn't use the directory variable. I would create a page parameter inside of my interior page template, for example, and I would have this data right here pull from that instead of a directory variable. But at the end of the day, the process is still the same. Does it exist? If it exists, then we're going to output it, and it's just a different question of where it's trying to grab that information from. So with all that being said, that's a quick description of what the starter code looks like. Let's actually test it out. So what I'm going to do is, now that I've saved this XSL, any page that I make from here on out is going to grab that information. So let's just do a couple tests here. So I'm going to go ahead and make another page. Test number 1. We'll go ahead and create that. From an OU campus standpoint, everything else is basically looking the same. The page looks the same. I've got editable regions. If I hop over into properties, nothing's changed here as well. It's just a normal page. Now let's go ahead and publish it. When I publish this page and view it in a new window, I can view the source of it. And now when I scroll through here, we should be able to see that, oh, you know what? Haha, silly me. I hadn't actually saved common.xsl yet. My apologies. I spent so much time talking about the social meta information that I added the template call, but I didn't actually save this file yet. Alrighty, so now that I've saved common XSL, let's just publish this page one more time. Sorry about that. And let's go back to this page and refresh it. Okay, so now that it's been republished, now let's view the source of it. And there we go, now it's showing up. Okay, so just like what we had before, I've still got all of my metadata up here, but now I've got my new meta properties. So you can see the OG title is pulling from the standard page title. The OG URL is the same exact URL that I just had, for the actual page. The OG description, right now that's blank because the description for the rest of my page is blank. The OG site name is the same thing as the title, and the OG type has been manually defined as the website. And also, I have a Twitter card that now has summary. So now let's compare and contrast. I have this social meta test page, but then you recall that I also had, here, let's go. I also had this normal OU campus page that I had created before I changed up my XSL. So this page right here and this page right here were both created using OU campus templates. This one has meta tags. This one does not. So if I were to grab the one that does not, and I put it in Twitter, for example, and I tweet it out, it'll probably just be a normal link, correct? But now, if I go to the new page that I've published after editing the XSL, we can see that after I do a refresh, now I've got a Twitter card coming through. So in this case, this has given us at least a little bit to start with. I at least have a card that's getting appeared, and the title of the page is being output, the URL is being output, but you'll notice that I'm missing some information based on what I had here. Like I don't have an image, and I'm also missing a description. So let's take this one step farther and use one of those directory variables to go ahead and take this one step further. So the benefit to what we already did with the XSL is that every time I share a link that's generated from OU Campus from this point onwards, all of those links are going to output at the very least a rudimentary Twitter card, because we're outputting the Open Graph title and the Open Graph description and things of that nature. Excuse me. So let's go back into OU Campus. I don't need to be in my XSL file anymore. And I'm going to go in and to the social meta folder, I'm going to edit the access settings for it. Directory variables are edited and managed from this access settings dialog box. And what I can go down here is I can go in and create a new variable. And I'm going to call it OG-image. Because if you recall, actually I did need to go back to the XSL. If you recall, if we go back to my social meta file, this XSL param, this is what determines the name that we should create when we make the directory variable inside of access settings. So basically everything that follows the OU colon, that's going to be the name that we defined in the system. If you want a bit more of an overview about directory variables, we did a Training Tuesday on it about 2 years ago, and it gives you a bit more of a holistic overview of kind of how things work in the back end. I'm kind of going through this part a little bit fast, and I understand that that might catch a couple of people off guard. I would highly recommend checking out our Training Tuesday on directory variables to get a bit more background as to kind of how that process is working. But just as a very, very simple refresher, basically, if you define an XSL param and you preface it with OU colon, you can use whatever is after that colon as a directory variable. So if I wanted to put an image on that Twitter card, I'm going to go ahead and define the OG-image directory variable. And then I can just assign it a value, and that value is going to be the file path for where that image is located. So with that in mind, let's go ahead and find an image that we can use. I should note this will not be a dependency tag. It's going to be just a full URL, fully fledged. So if I go to resources, images, let's see, campus, and let's see what a couple of these images look like. That's a nice looking cathedral situation. Ooh, but I think I like this one the best. Yeah, I like this one because it gives me this nice big panoramic view. So I'm going to go ahead and have my OG image be westcampus.png. So the way to do that is I can go in here and just do http:// If you have a production copy of this image, then you can just obviously copy and paste the URL. I'm going to just type it out, /_resources, /images, campus, and then I think it was westcampus.png. Is that correct? west_campus.png. There's my file path. Cool. Okay, so I have now defined my Open Graph image for all of the pages that live inside of that folder. So I'm going to hit save. And in my testing, I found that Twitter and Facebook tend to cache any information that you've provided from a social meta standpoint. So if you shared a post on that service and you try to share that post again with the same link, it'll tend to take whatever the original metadata information was and just hold on to that. So just in the purposes of refreshing it manually, I'm going to make another test page. Normally, you could probably just, update your existing one, but since I'm doing these tests kind of quickly, it's going to be a bit more efficient if I do it this way. All right, so let's make another test page. This one's going to have an image on it when I embed it onto Twitter, for example. And you can see the page is no different. You know, none of that has changed. It's just a matter of now when I hit publish and view it in a new window, and I look at the source of this, we're going to go ahead and see that I've got all my social meta tags. And you can see that one of the pieces of information that I provided is my OG image right here. So you can see that that's one piece of metadata that I had beforehand. And there's OG image content. There's the URL that I provided. And I actually just got a chat from Jason Cash, and he was just reminding me that you can use the Facebook OG debugger to rescrape your pages. Absolutely. I was actually going to talk about some useful tools that you can use with this whole process kind of at the end of it. So I will come back to that. But yes, great point. If the caching is a problem for your testing process, you can use the debugger to clear all of that caching out. Excuse me. Okay, so now I have an OG image tag. When I post this page on Twitter, for example, I should be able to see a card with an actual image in that little thumbnail portion. So let's do one more example tweet here. And tweet it out. And then we'll refresh one more time. And we can see that now I've got my image that's defined. And I've got my new title. And if I were to just do one more quick thing, I could probably have adjusted that description as well. But hopefully you guys kind of get the idea. You have the ability to define this information either on a page-by-page basis, a directory-by-directory basis. If you wanted to, you could even hard code some of this information just into the XSL itself. Generally, that's probably not a good idea because you're probably going to have some sort of, variability depending on where you are within the page or within your site. But that's kind of the basics for how all that process is working. So that pretty much brings us to most of what I wanted to talk about today, just to give you an overview of social meta tags, how they work, why they're useful, and then finally how to actually get them into OU Campus if you don't have them already. A couple final best practice recommendations that I would want to pass along to you guys. So first of all, with all of those directory variables that I mentioned and that are declared inside of that starter code, sometimes it can be tough. If you're going to a directory and you have to go in and manually create a new variable, it might be hard to figure out what's the name of the directory variable that I want to actually go ahead and use. If it hasn't been defined anywhere else, it may be tough to figure that out. So what I like to do is, and this is something that our professional services developers have been doing a lot as well, is if you have a directory variable that has been declared inside of your code, what we like to do is we like to go to the site access settings, the top level access settings that you can play with, and just declare all of them here. So that way, when you actually want to use them, you don't have to manually type out the name anymore. You can just pick from the dropdown. So I'm going to basically declare all 6 of my directory variables that the code supports currently, just so people kind of know what they can use. And another note is if you find that the directory variable names that we've given you in the sample code aren't super descriptive and you'd rather change those names, you're absolutely free to. There's no problem with that at all. So here's my social metas. These are the 6 that I'm going to declare. So let's first of all just create a new variable and call it OG-image. And I'm going to leave the value, OG image. And I'll just leave the value blank for now because I'm not necessarily wanting to use it across my site just yet. I just want to tell people that, hey, you can use this. And we'll just repeat this process for Twitter image. And Twitter creator. There's another Twitter one, I think it's Twitter site. FB admins and the Facebook app ID. FB admins and Facebook app ID. So now I've declared my directory variables. I can just hit save right here. And now if I were to go to, admissions or athletics perhaps, and I want to add some social tags, what I can do now is I can just add a new directory variable. And then in the dropdown, I'm going to scroll down to my inherited variables, and I'll just say OG image, and I'll point it to a URL somewhere. So that way I don't have to type out OG image every single time. I've already defined it once, so I can just choose it from the drop-down menu from here on out. So that's just something that's a little bit easier to make that life a little bit faster. Another best practice recommendation / reminder is that if you change the value of a directory variable, you're going to want to publish any pages that are affected by that change. So when I went to the social meta and I added that OG image, it's probably, I made a new page and that was fine. But if I wanted all the other pages to use that as well, I would want to take this information and I would publish all of these pages too, in order for them to grab that OG image that I've defined. So just remember, if you change a directory variable, the best practice is to publish the folder that you just changed it on. So that way all of their pages will get that information. So that's kind of just one thing on that. But then finally, just to kind of wrap up, as Jason mentioned, there's a lot of resources, open graph tags and everything like that. It's not just something that we do in OU Campus. It's something across the entire web. There's a lot of people who have given a lot of best practice recommendations for, when to use certain tags, what the best practices are for, how large the images should be and things like that. And there's also some testing tools that are available as well. So I put all of this stuff in the PowerPoints. I would encourage you after this, if you guys want to implement this into your site, go to the PowerPoint files that we are going to put on the support site, download it, and follow these links. So for some reason, the animations threw me off a little bit, but I'm just going to basically throw them all right here. So the first thing, if you want to get started really quickly, go to the GitHub and grab the example social meta code that we used today. That's going to get you up and running to use at least the very basics of your social meta code really quickly. And as we showed right here, it took maybe 15 minutes to implement in a relatively modern implementation. So it's very, very plug and play. It's basically upload the file, make 2 small lines of code adjustment in your common.xsl, and it should be ready to go. So a couple pages that I found were useful as I was prepping for this training. There was a great CSStricks.com article on social meta tags just to kind of explain the essentials. There's also some great documentation on the Open Graph Protocols homepage. So if you go to ogp.me, that will explain here's all of the Open Graph tags, and it's directly from the source. It's from the people who maintain that protocol, so you know it's accurate. As Jason mentioned in the chat, the Facebook debugger is great. If you want to do a more robust method of testing out your posts before you actually share them on Facebook, if you're working on trying to do best practices for getting this meta code working on, go to developers.facebook.com/tools/debug, and that's going to allow you to preview what your posts are going to look like if you were to share them on Facebook, and it also allows you to debug any issues that are happening. In the same way, there's a similar process for the Twitter cards. So if you go to cardsdev.twitter.com/validator, you can essentially just post a link, and it will give you a preview of what that card will look like, as well as provide any debugging information. One thing that's interesting about Twitter that's different from Facebook is that Twitter is going to obey your robots.txt file. So if you have, all your user agents disallowed for some reason, like I had on my sandbox at first, you're not going to see any cards, even if you have the Open Graph tags, because robots.txt takes precedence. But thanks to the Twitter card validator, I was able to figure out what was going on, and we were able to resolve the issue. So both of those resources are really great if you want to just make sure that the stuff that you're outputting in your pages are working correctly. And then there's also some just getting started pages on both Twitter's and Facebook's site. that I've provided you links here. That'll give you some information on just how to get started. It'll once again kind of explain the main cards, what they're utilized for, and how to use them. So this should be enough resources to kind of get your guys' feet wet. And as time goes on, there's a lot more that you can do with this. This is just kind of the surface, but I hope that the surface gets more people to use these Open Graph and Twitter tags, because at the end of the day, the world's going to get more and more socially relevant. Social media tagging is going to become more and more important, and you might as well start playing with it now. So when it becomes super vital, you'll already have some skills with it. So with that in mind, thank you everybody for attending today's session. As a reminder, we do these every month on the last Tuesday. Next session is going to be on July 31st, and we're going to be talking about the mechanics of OU Campus kind of running in the background, a bit of an introduction of kind of how XSL is working and some things along those lines.
Yes, thank you everybody for attending. And if you want to look back at this later, the recorded presentation materials and PowerPoint slides will be available on our support site. And as Brandon said, next training Tuesday, July 31st, we're going to be talking about, like you said, the mechanics of OU Campus, going through how it works behind the scenes. It's especially useful if you maybe know somebody who's a less technical admin, but they want to learn about how OU Campus does what it does. This would be a great session for them to attend. So stay tuned for the registration link. And one last thing, if there's any questions about the presentation, this is a great time to get them in. But if I don't hear any questions, one last thing, don't forget to fill out the feedback survey. Once this session closes, we love hearing from you, and it helps us tailor our Training Tuesdays to what you want to see and what's most useful for you. All right, so if there's no questions, then I'll say thank you everybody for attending, and have a great rest of your day.